Eyesight is one of the oldest, most ruthlessly perfected survival tools on this planet. For over 500 million years, the rule has been simple. If you can't see the predator, you get eaten. In fact, biological cameras are so important that evolution has independently invented the eye somewhere between 40 and 65 separate times across the animal kingdom. So why is the most cognitively advanced species Earth has ever produced the only one that routinely cannot read a street sign without strapping a curved piece of glass to its face? Evolution has had 500 million years of practice to get this right. It didn't fail, but it did leave you with a permanent structural flaw, a catastrophic environmental mismatch, and a massive evolutionary blind spot. If you were going to build a camera, the layout is obvious. Light comes in through the lens, hits the sensor, and a cable runs out the back to carry the data. Simple, clean. Your eye is wired completely upside down. In the vertebrate eye, yours included, the light-sensing cells called photoreceptors are pointed backward. They are facing away from the incoming light. Sitting right in front of them is a dense, messy layer of nerve, fibers and blood vessels. Light has to physically fight its way through a wall of biological cables just to reach the sensor. And it gets worse. To get that visual signal to your brain, all those nerves have to bundle together and punch a giant hole straight through your retina to exit the eyeball. That hole has 0 light sensors. That is your blind spot. It is sitting in your visual field right now. You just don't notice it because your brain is constantly painting over the gap with a best guess of the surrounding image. So, why would evolution build something backward and just leave it there for millions of years? Because evolution never starts with a blank page. It edits. Vertebrate eyes evolved from an existing patch of neural tissue in an ancient common ancestor. The wiring in front layout was already locked into that tissue before anything resembling a modern eye even existed. Once a structure like that is established, natural selection can't just hit pause, take the system apart, and rebuild it the right way. Because every intermediate step of taking the eye apart would result in terrible vision. And animals with terrible vision get eaten. Evolution only patches what already exists. If you want proof, look in the ocean. Octopuses and other cephalopods evolved camera-type eyes completely independently from us. And their retinas are wired the correct way around. Photoreceptors face the light. Wiring is tucked behind them, and they have absolutely 0 blind spots. Same biological problem, but a much cleaner result, purely because the octopus lineage started their evolutionary experiment from a different piece of starting tissue than we did. In fact, a widely cited 1994 study by researchers Dan Erik Nilsson and Susanna Pelger, they proved that a fully formed camera eye could evolve from a simple flat patch of light-sensitive cells in fewer than 400,000 generations. Evolutionarily speaking, that is practically overnight. Eyes are not hard for evolution to build. What evolution can't do is go back and fix a structural quirk once it lays the foundation. You are looking at the world through an ancient patch job. And today, that patch job is colliding with a world it was never calibrated for. For most of the 20th century, scientists assumed nearsightedness was entirely genetic. You inherited your parents' blurry eyes, and that was it. But genetics cannot explain what is happening right now. In East Asian megacities like Seoul and Shanghai, roughly 80 to 90% of young adults finishing high school are now myopic. 2 generations ago, in those exact same regions, the rate was a fraction of that. One of the clearest proofs of this comes from a massive 1969 study on the Inuit population of Barrow, Alaska. Among adults who grew up before Western-style schooling was introduced, myopia was almost non-existent. But among their own children, raised indoors with formal schooling, myopia rates absolutely exploded in a single generation. Genes don't mutate that fast. The environment moved instead. So what is the actual trigger? It comes down to one molecule, dopamine. When your eyes are exposed to bright outdoor light, it triggers a massive release of dopamine from cells in your retina. During childhood, that dopamine acts as a biological emergency brake. It tells the eyeball to stop growing. Specifically, it restrains excessive axial elongation, which is just a fancy way of saying it stops the eye from stretching out too long. Indoor environments, even well-lit offices, don't come anywhere close to the light intensity of the actual sun. Because modern children spend the vast majority of their lives indoors, staring at close-up screens, that dopamine brake is chronically under-triggered. The eyeball never gets the signal to stop, so it just keeps growing until the lens can no longer focus light properly. In 2015, researcher He Mingguang proved this. He took a group of school children in China and forced them to spend just 40 extra minutes outside every day, not running marathons, not doing eye exercises, just sitting under the actual sun for less than an hour. After 3 years, that group had a meaningfully lower rate of new myopia cases than the control group. 40 minutes, that is all it took to re-engage the biological brake. But in a modern world, where the average teenager logs over 7 hours of screen time a day, those 40 minutes are becoming statistically extinct. This is a textbook Mismatch Disease. A trait that worked perfectly in an ancient environment is now causing massive dysfunction because the modern world changed faster than biology could possibly track. We engineered our way to total comfort and accidentally broke our own sensors in the process. So, if bad eyesight is this prevalent and the genes for it have always been lurking in our DNA, why didn't natural selection just scrub it from the gene pool entirely? Because natural selection has absolutely no concept of quality of life, comfort, or convenience. It only cares about one thing: reproductive success. If a biological flaw doesn't stop you from having kids, evolution simply doesn't care. Myopia develops during childhood, but historically humans are a hypersocial cooperative species. If you were slightly nearsighted in an ancient hunter-gatherer tribe, you didn't instantly die like a solitary wolf would. Your tribe protected you. In fact, you became a highly specialized asset. While the eagle-eyed members of the tribe went out to track mammoths, the nearsighted humans stayed by the fire. You became the person carefully napping flint into razor-sharp arrowheads. You were the one painstakingly sewing animal hides together to keep the tribe from freezing. Your defective close-up vision was actually perfectly calibrated for paleolithic manufacturing. You survived, you provided immense value to the community, and you safely passed your myopic genes to the next generation. And what about conditions like presbyopia? The reason almost every single human being on Earth eventually needs reading glasses. Inside your eye, the lens is made of highly specialized crystalline proteins. These proteins accumulate in layers over your lifetime, exactly like the rings of a tree. But there is no biological trash removal system for them. By your early 40s, those older protein layers stiffen, cross-link, and basically turn rigid. The lens completely loses the flexibility it needs to change shape and focus on close objects. Cataracts follow a very similar late-onset pattern, where those exact same proteins begin to cloud over entirely. But evolution doesn't care. By the time you hit your 40s in the ancient world, your reproductive window was largely closed. You already passed your genes on. You are now living in what biologists call the evolutionary shadow. Once you are done reproducing, the biological warranty on your body expires and natural selection simply stops checking for errors. Your eyes were only ever guaranteed for about 35 years. Evolution doesn't aim for a fixed ideal of perfection. It just improves whatever specific thing keeps you alive today. For example, most mammals are actually colorblind, But humans, along with some other Old World primates, have incredibly rare trichromatic vision. We see three color ranges. Why? Because millions of years ago, a literal genetic accident duplicated an opsin gene in our DNA. That genetic copy-paste allowed our primate ancestors to easily spot bright, red, sugar-rich fruit against a dense green forest backdrop. It paid off in immediate survival calories, so evolution kept the mutation. It didn't keep it because seeing colours is beautiful. It kept it because the monkeys who could see red didn't starve to death during a famine. And then humans did the most human thing possible. We engineered our way out of the problem entirely. In Italy in the late 1200s, the first crude eyeglasses appeared in the historical record, mostly used by aging scholars and monks who couldn't read their manuscripts anymore. Once those curved pieces of glass started spreading through trade routes, the actual survival penalty for having blurry vision completely vanished. We removed the evolutionary pressure. We built a physical shield against natural selection, solving a millions of years old biological problem with a piece of medieval technology, generations before genetics could ever have caught up. None of this is evolution failing you. It is evolution behaving exactly the way it always has. It patched an ancient backward design because it couldn't start over. It calibrated your biological sensors for a bright outdoor world, completely unaware that you were going to build a dark, indoor, screen-addicted society. And it only ever bothered to fix the problems that actively stopped you from having kids, leaving the rest of the decay for you to deal with on your own time. You don't have broken eyes. You have an incredibly successful, highly efficient biological compromise sitting in your skull. And luckily, it only took us a few 100 million years to figure out how to put some curved glass in front of it.